When I was in search of a new drum machine a couple months ago, the Octatrack wasn't even on my mind. I was dead set on getting the analog rhythm to pair with the analog 4 because it just made sense. I love the form factor, I'm familiar with the sequencer and the workflow. It's got that punchy analog sound engine, plus you can layer samples on top. So while I was waiting for a good deal on a used rhythm to pop up, I got an offer on an Octatrack that I just couldn't ignore, so it made me wonder, can I use the Octatrack as a drum machine? The plan was to eventually get the Octatrack and use that as a performance mixer once I had a drum machine, but I was wondering, could I kill two birds with one stone and use the Octatrack as both a drum machine and a performance mixer? I did some research online and the general consensus seemed to be, yes, you can use the Octatrack as a drum machine, but it's not meant to be, so it's not ideal. You should rather get a dedicated machine like the Rhythm, the Digitact, or a TR-8S. But I said, whatever, 1,000 internet people can't all be right. So I took the plunge, got the OT, have been using it as a drum machine for the past couple of months, and I gotta say, it's been working out great, and it's perfect for my workflow and my musical needs. So let me show you how I use it as a drum machine and why it fits so perfectly with what I'm doing. I'm a guitarist, I'm not a drummer, I'm not even a finger drummer. So when I'm trying to write a beat, it's hard for me to take what I'm hearing in my head and program that into a machine. It's tedious and it requires a lot of trial and error. I mean, I can create simple beats and patterns, but after a while they all start sounding the same. Plus, you can't beat the feel and the groove of a real drummer. That's why with the Octatrack and using drum loops, that's just perfect for me because it's one less thing that I have to think about. It's all there. I just take a good sounding drum loop and I can build a track around that. So here's the loop that I'm going to build my song around. It's just a kind of funky, cool sounding drum beat right here. So nothing fancy or complex about that, but it sounds good. It's something better than I could make up on the spot. I don't have to think about it anymore. It's like I got my drums down. I don't need to think about kick is on this step, snare is on that, hats are doing this. It's just all done in one go. And now I have something that I can build my song around. On a given song, I'll have different drum loops on 2 or 3 tracks and layer them to create interesting polyrhythmic patterns and fuller sounding drum kits. I try to find loops that complement each other. For example, maybe one will be a simple driving beat and the other will have more complex fills. Having multiple drum loops can also be helpful for transitions, for buildups and breakdowns, but when you're layering loops, the thing that you have to be careful of is making sure that they're not fighting each other because then it can sound really chaotic and messy. So there's no exact science to this. See what sounds best to your ears and just make that work. So here's that same loop again. But now I'm going to layer it with this beat right here. This one's kind of a simpler driving synthetic drum beat. So just pairing them together, this is how they sound like. And on top of that, just to keep some of that driving rhythm going. I'm going to also add just this hi-hat rhythm. Because sometimes with loops, the problem is some of the individual drum parts don't really cut through, whether that's the kick, the snare, or the hats. So add them together like this. And with that, we've got something that sounds a lot more interesting than just the original drum loop that we started with. And it's also got a bit more punch. It sounds fuller. And then lastly, I also have this other kind of bass growly thing going on as well. So interesting kind of glitchy, growly beat going there. Put it all together. That's a lot more interesting and fuller sounding than if we just had If you have the same drum loop playing throughout the whole song, that can be very boring. So a good but simple way to add variety to your drums is to create triggers with different start points. So what I'll do is I'll have one pattern that plays just the original loop, and then I'll have another pattern and add different triggers that have different start points. And that way you add variety and make it interesting while still retaining the same sound and feel of the original loop. So on pattern B1, I have just for that drum loop, if we look at the trigs for that, I just have one trig right here at the start just to get the loop started. So not really changing anything with this beat on this pattern. But if we switch it over to pattern 2, you see I've added a lot more trigs. So same kind of initial sounds, but it's definitely a different beat rhythm because of all of the different trigs that I've put down here. So if you look at this, right, this one starts on slice 17, this one on 20, 51, 15, and so on, just to add variation, right? So you can go from just adding a few different things to you can really rearrange the entire beat and create your own beat. I didn't really change the other drum loops so much. I think I might have put a couple different trigs here and there, but for the most part, they're just looping as they were in the previous pattern, but let's hear them all together again. Let me just start by adding one loop at a time. Another simple way to spice up your drum loops is to use the retrigger parameter to add rolls and fills. I usually do this at the end of a pattern. I'll choose the slice that I want to retrigger, set the retrigger amount and the speed of that, and then just experiment with what sounds good. So again, going back to the first drum loop, what I did there, everything's the same except on this trig right here, which is on 11. I've got a retrigger here. So the retrigger amount 4, retrigger time 2. So if we just play this, and play it again. And then if we, let's hear it without the retrigs. So if we just play that again. Then if we have this on retrig 4 again, it's got a bit of that snare roll. Again. All right, and let's, add a bit more. Let's do 8 on that one, see how that sounds. All right, so again, that's something that you just want to have fun with and experiment with. Like I was saying, there's no real science or right or wrong way to do it, but just whatever sounds good and best and fits the song. Lastly, use scenes with different settings on your LFOs to create variety. I'll have one LFO altering the start points of the loops and then another one affecting the retrigger amount, and play around with these, set these to taste. It can go from subtle, simple variations to really glitchy, broken sounding drums, and you have to be okay with the degree of unpredictability with the Octatrack, but that's what makes it so fun. So I'm going to play, this is on scene 1, which nothing altered, just all of the drum loops going on at once. On scene B, though, if we look at the LFO here, so if we look at how the LFOs are set up, LFO 1 is going to be affecting where the drum loop starts, so the start point there. For track 1, track 2, different LFO waves. This one's on random. And then if we go to LFO 2, then that's going to be affecting the amount of retriggering for each of those loops. So, and then on scene 2, you can see that the LFO speed for LFO 1 and the depth is affected on these scenes, on this scene for tracks 1, 2, and 4. So I'm going to shuffle back and forth and see how that sounds, going from just regular unaffected beat to it with the LFOs affecting the start point for each of those loops. So should have been able to hear some difference, especially towards the end. It seemed a bit more like jagged and chaotic there. Again, so like I was saying, it's going to be a bit unpredictable depending on how much you're having the LFO affect it. Put this on, also switch back between scene 2 and 3. 3 is also affecting the start point, but also having the speed and then the depth of the LFO different than on scene 2, just to have different options there. then in another scene, in scene 9 here, this time I'm having the LFO2 affect the retrigger amount on these loops. So you'll hear a bit more stuttering and glitchiness going on as it's repeating those triggers. So let me switch back and forth between scene 3, which is just being the start point being affected, and then scene 9, which is the retrigger amount. So it can sound a bit chaotic, I think, because it's just the drums by itself, especially when the retrigger goes crazy like that. But I think when you are listening to this in a mix in the context of a song, it makes more musical sense. So I'm gonna turn on the through track and have the analog 4 playing as well with the Octatrack. So. I hope this was helpful for you if you're using the Octatrack as a drum machine. Let me know in the comments below any other tips and tricks of how to use the Octatrack as a drum machine. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll check you guys out next time.